For those that are tuning into the webinar, we're going to start here in about 5 minutes. So just give us a couple minutes and we'll get going. Thank you. We'll start in like 5 minutes work for you.
Yep, sounds good. Josh.
Yes.
So, with your permission, these are the evaluations.
So I
You
have.
don't have to force them out. I know.
Okay,
you
yeah.
force, but for those that want some of the forms, I have some of those other things.
You can probably just leave them in front.
I'm just going to tell them I have them.
Okay,
Why don't we
that's
just
fine.
move back?
Some seats up front here for those that are just walking in. We're going to get started here in about 2 minutes. If you need to get some water. All right, we're going to get started here. So if you guys can find your seats. We're going to have some people trickle in. My name is Josh Wynn. I'm the program coordinator for Buckeye Wellness. I want to thank you guys all for coming today. We have a great program for you. Before we get started, just a couple upcoming events. We have our dodgeball, faculty and staff dodgeball event next Wednesday. Is anyone participating? Perfect. It's going to be a great tournament. There's about 36 teams, so a lot of competition. Next Tuesday is our cooking demo over at the Kingsdale Giant Eagle, starting at 6, so you can register for that at linktohealth.osu.edu. For today's Lunch and Learn, We're going to be speaking on financial planning for the new year. We have Jay Lindner, who is the president of COPEC. He's been in the financial industry for about 25 years and is a certified financial planner. So please welcome Jay. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Josh. Thanks, everybody, for coming out today. Josh, a little bit of order, since we're starting late, still stay on roughly about the same time frame.
Yeah, we're going to have about 10, 15 minutes for questions and answers at the end for the webinar folks. If you can hear me, if you guys want to shoot me an email, if you have any questions, it's winn.50@osu.edu, and then I'll announce these out. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I'll try to push through this a little bit, and usually on webinars, it's hard to get people's questions in and things of that nature, and we're going to try to do as much as possible at the end. But if there's some areas that you want me to go, expound upon a little bit, just let me know, and I'll definitely spend some time there. As Josh said, I'm a certified financial planner. I'm happy to come out and through COPEC and a number of different organizations, we do presentations out here quite often. We try to cover a lot of different topics. And so if you like the program you see today, let them know, and we can try to make sure we come out with some other areas that will be helpful to you. So today, I think what we're going to talk about primarily is budgeting. I assume that's what everybody's here for. Is that correct? All right. Well, we were kind of talking about, you kind of come up with the holidays, and one of the things that we find is as the holidays comes on, how many people here remember the old Christmas funds from the banks, right? Well, today the Christmas fund for a lot of people is what? Credit cards, right, exactly. So we're going to kind of go into this a little bit, and really today the flavor is going to be really more about getting control, awareness, and long-term benefit of understanding budgeting and some of the impacts that we could try to address. And one of the things that we have a program that we do, but I wanted to share some of this with you. Everybody here heard of like Dave Ramsey or some of these other systems that help you with your cash flow and budgeting and things like that? Those are all wonderful systems. One of the biggest things that I really think is most important whenever anybody is trying to get control of a budget, it's not being orderly. It's being clear and transparent. Orderly will come. Obviously, you could do that. But if you don't look at your statements, if you don't look at what you're spending money on, just being clear of what you're doing, you'll be far ahead of the game if you at least start doing that. So we'll get into that a little bit as well. So first of all, this is always a slide that I always enjoy. Basically, how many people here have dreams that they want to accomplish, right? And it requires financial. Some are short term. How many people want to have a great Christmas and make sure they take care of their family and make sure they do charity work and do some of the things that they want to do? But then some are midterm, and ultimately the underlying goal that we all have is what? Retirement early. It is to retire. So I'm not going to overly focus on this, but one of the big keys whenever you deal with budgets is that you need to understand a couple things. One is there's a big long-term game plan that you have in play. It doesn't matter if you're 30 and you have short-term goals, that retirement is going to come sooner than you think. Or if you retire and you feel like you have a lot of money, but you don't budget, that can dwindle, and then all of a sudden, how's your lifestyle when you're 85 or 90? So those are things we want to really look at. Whatever the goal, start with a sound budget. I'd probably say about 25% of our time with clients who are approaching retirement on budgeting. A lot of times people think, well, that's for people that are younger. I promise you it's not. It's for everybody. The ramifications are even bigger if you don't have that under control by the time you retire and start dealing with the budget in retirement. So obviously budgeting, starting out, and I'm going to say this, and I have sometimes a lot of people contradict me on this, and so feel free and have at it. The first thing I'll say is that I personally, I'm not going to say for the university, your benefits or anything like that, but I personally do not get overly worried about worrying about retirement in your 20s. Okay? Now, the reason why I say that is there's twofold. One is obviously worry about retirement and putting money aside and taking care of the long-term goals. But here's a problem that a lot of people do. If you only have $3, one is to pay the mortgage, one is to take care of something else, and the other one is put in retirement, but you're using credit cards to buy Christmas presents and you don't have money in case you have an emergency or an accident, where's it going to come from? Sometimes we're limited on the dollars we have to meet the short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. And if you over worry about retirement and not create a sound foundation short-term, well, then sometimes people can get in a lot of trouble. So it's not that you don't, it's that you make sure you do it in a sequential way, taking care of the short-term issues first. Getting settled, obviously people in the 30s, finding priorities. This is where a lot of people are like, hey, there's a light at the end of the tunnel here. I need to start focusing on this and start figuring out, am I on target, especially in the 50s, and then in that transition period in the 60s. We work with people all the time in budgeting there. It is critical to take care of those years. And then in retirement, if you don't stay on budget, you can easily run off track and lose track of how much funds, we'll get into this in a little bit, you have for that entire period. One of the things I did want to do up here, we're not handing out, you've got your own evaluation forms, but if you have any interest in any of the forms that we have, we'll share them with you through email or something like that. If you have questions or concerns, feel free to let me know. We can give you our other COPEC evaluation form, and we'll hand that out to you as well. Sometimes people have some questions or other concerns. So, real quick, this is something that I make crystal clear to everybody. You got to be extremely careful. The majority of retirement plans that fail, they don't fail because you didn't save enough. They don't fail because you didn't know how to invest. They fail because you didn't stay on a proper budget. And I don't mean that you have to spend less than you want. It's that if you have a retirement plan and it says that you're going to spend this much money in retirement, I would say 90% of the time they spend more. So you retire with the feeling that you have enough money, but then in reality you end up spending more because you either didn't project properly or you didn't stay within the budget you retired under those assumptions. So start training yourself as early as possible to have that understanding is critical. For budgeting, we're going to walk down through some of these, and I just want to see that they resonate with you. One is, the first thing is educate yourself. Just educate. Understand what the value is of budgeting and credit cards and interest rates and emergency funds and all those types of things. Advocate. Just like anything else you're trying to accomplish, sometimes it's a good idea to get an advocate to support you, whether it's an advisor, whether it's a friend, whether it's a spouse, making sure that when you're making decisions and you're trying to reach the goal that somebody's holding you accountable to reach those points, whatever it might be. There's a lot of tools. I'm sure you guys have access to a number of tools, financial independence, projections, and think of financial independence tools as your GPS on your map. You're going from here to Toledo at a small restaurant and some obscure street. It's nice to have a general map that tells you what it is, but you still got to worry about what's in front of you. So the financial independence tools gives you that big picture so that you know, or another time we use the examples, you're driving down the road, you got to see what's right in front of you, but wouldn't it be nice driving 60 miles an hour to see a turn coming up, quarter mile down the road or whatever it is? So it's real important that you use those tools. Clarify where you are with current spending. A lot of people don't even know how much they spend per month or per year right now because, well, they took money out of here, they saved it in here, they put it on a credit card here, but they pulled a loan out of their 401k to make up for this, and then they got, somebody gave them a gift to offset that. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that happen, and a lot of times people don't even know where they are right now. A big thing is surplus and deficit on your personal finances, okay? So the number one thing you have to do when you're really starting to get to work after just seeing what you have is verify that you have a surplus. If you have a deficit, what's happening? What's that? Right, but what's happening as you're spending too much? You're building up credit debt usually. For those that remember, before 2008 market correction, one of the most common commercials that I remember seeing was debt consolidation, right? And so they basically, there's one commercial that just reminds me of this a lot. There's a guy, he's like, I'm a member of my local golf club, and I have a beautiful home, and I have this, and then towards the end he goes, and I'm in debt up to my eyeballs, or whatever it was. So he's living the good life, but he's paying for it through credit or debt of one way or another. And so the advertisement was to sell them on taking out a home equity line on their home, use that equity to pay off that debt. So the first question is that a good idea? Financially, in that moment, it's a great idea, right? Because why would you pay 20% on a credit card when you can pay 3% on a home equity line and deduct it from your taxes, which has changed, by the way. So that act is a good act, but what's the problem? You're not stopping the problem. That's just a symptom. The problem is you're overspending clearly, and you have to fix that. Otherwise, that cycle will continue, and that's why bankruptcy and things like that is so common. So understanding that surplus and deficit, and I'll show you some examples of that. Credit cards, getting control, positive cash flow, emergency fund. I'll talk about that real briefly. Credit reports. How many people have looked at their credit report in the last year? Excellent. That's huge. That is so huge. There's false, there's old, there's all kinds of problems there. I actually graduated here about 25 years ago. And when I went and got my first car, they showed that I had this problem. I'm like, what are you talking about, a problem? And so, because I never really stayed on top of it. Well, I had a small, it was like a Discover card or something, and it had a balance of like $50. That's it. And I moved a couple times, lost track of the bill, didn't pay attention to it, didn't care. It followed me. It's not going away. So obviously, staying on top of your credit reports, making sure they're current. If you did close an account, make sure it's being reported, right? All of those things. And obviously, FICO reports. Pay down debts, and then fund retirement, ultimately, to make sure that you can retire. Some budgeting tools. Spreadsheets are great if somebody wants to use a spreadsheet. I actually still use spreadsheets, personally. I'm the type of person, you know, we use QuickBooks for my office and nonprofit, but for me personally, I just use a spreadsheet, just simple. Credit card expense tracking tools. I know a lot of banks, right? Now, the problem with the bank, a single bank, is what? That's only reporting one of your spending habits. What about cash? What about other credit cards, things like that? Retirement plan tools. Everybody here has access to those through your 403Bs, 457, state pensions, things like that. Account aggregation. We use one with our clients that has spending tools on it, so you can actually link all of your credit cards and all of your accounts into one, so it records it all together. I think mint.com is an aggregator, things like that, and those are free, I believe you can access. And then financial independence, spending validation. This is just like budgets. You know, at the end of the year, your projections say that you should have been able to save a certain amount of money. Did you or did you not? And if you did, if you didn't, let's find out why, right? And then I actually help teach, which is what we really talked about here today. I actually help teach what I call basically a 3-bucket approach. And it's a way for people to let's say, for example, you're trying to go on a diet. What's the first thing you do? You throw everything away in your kitchen that even remotely is tempting, right? And then once you get control, then you can start bringing in stuff that might, whatever it might be, especially if you have kids. So this approach is a great way to really cleanse everything, start over, get control, and move money and be very deliberate on how you're managing those funds to get it to a point that works for you. Emergency fund, this is probably the most important piece about everything. I don't care if you're retired or you're in your 20s, you must have ready cash available for any reason on a moment's notice. If you have a health problem, you go to the hospital, and you have a deductible, how are you going to pay for it? If you have a car accident, how are you going to pay for it? If you're trying to save up for a first home, the emergency fund turns into a savings account maybe. If that first home, no joke, Monday morning, my 18-year-old water heater went out. Well, how am I going to pay for it? Well, I have cash set aside for all these types of things that have to happen. So a lot of people get in trouble because if they don't have that emergency fund, what do? Put it on a credit card. Health insurance, car insurance, very important, those types of deductibles. What happens if you lose your job? For those of us that have been around a little bit longer, we've gone through several cycles where we've seen major layoffs. How do those people survive until the economy comes back, they can find a new job? How are they going to pay their mortgage? How are they going to pay their car payment, take care of their kids without ready funds available to cover those? And then the last thing is your Roth IRA. Roth IRAs, now I'm not talking about a Roth 401k or a Roth 403b. I'm talking about an actual Roth IRA that you own yourself. Please research this. These are awesome tools to coexist as an emergency fund. And let me explain. If you have a 403b, do you guys have a Roth 403b here option, or is it just a straight full deductible? Okay. But if you have a savings account that has, let's say, $20,000, you've been working to save it, and you have $20,000, that every year, regardless, you can be phased out if you earn too much money, but you can move a portion of that over to a Roth, and all that does is it says it can stay as a savings vehicle, but it will grow tax-free as opposed to taxable. And then if you do that every year, it just continues to add up. The nice part about it, you can invest it any way you can, any emergency fund. But the nice thing about it is that you can also pull out all of your deposits right away, not wait till you're retired if you have a need, or if you want to use it to pay for college, or use it to buy a house, or use it to buy a boat, or go on a vacation, whatever it is. My point is that savings vehicle has a lot of liquidity features, but it grows tax-free. The biggest limits is how much you can put into it each year, and when you take money out, you can only take out your basis. So if you put in $5,000 a year for 5 years, but it grows to $30,000, you can pull out the 25, you cannot pull out the 5. So it's a cost basis withdrawal feature. So make sure you look into that as you start saving, and again, going through that process of clarity, creating a positive cash flow, building an emergency fund, and then saving for the goals and expanding your retirement savings as you go. As far as emergency fund, how much do you want to put aside and save for if you lose your job? Please be critical on this. If you are a sole breadwinner of a family and you lose your job, and you're in a career that it's hard to find another job, well, you better save 6 months or a year's worth. If you have 2 spouses, very low expenses, in careers that are easy to find new jobs, and your expenses are less than one person's income, well, then obviously you can be a little more aggressive with other things with your money. But be very careful on that with the emergency fund. So financial independence planning, how this ties into budgeting, basically, I kind of talked about it before. It's critical to know where you are, and the only way that you can reach those is knowing, think back to the vehicle, like I said. If you're going to go up to Toledo, budgeting is the fuel that gets you there. It's the confidence that that vehicle is going to get you there in good order. If you don't have a good budget, if you don't have good money management skills, You can luck into it, or you can have horrible management skills, but you make so much money that it doesn't matter. But for most people, it's a balancing act of that. So here, just general with financial independence, basically this helps you stay on track financially, investment allocation, model pension, Social Security, healthcare issues, income tax issues. So there's a lot of things that go into these projections. And what happens is that you basically have your savings period. So on the left, if you can see this, oh, wrong one. Over here, where it says portfolio, that's where you are today. It doesn't matter if you're 20 or 50. You are in a current situation. And what this projects is how much assets do you have to have so that when you retire, they will last out all the way through your retirement. And that's a very simple way of looking at this. So one of the key things is making sure that if you're falling short, what are some of the changes you can make to your savings habits, right? Or maybe working longer or spending less. What can you do to make it look like that as opposed to falling short like that? And it's interesting because one of the things we talk about a lot, you know, the younger you are, you worry about how am I going to get by. Then at some point you get a little comfortable. And in retirement, the one thing I want everybody to always remember is you always have enough money here, here, here. The problem is I try to get people to visualize how is their life going to be here. That's the key. We want to make sure that we don't outlive our money. So being very critical on the budgeting and the skills to be able to successfully navigate that is very important. Talked about the life events here. Some of the life events, some of the things that we really want to make sure of is through proper budgeting and saving and control, how do you make it through these different areas, whether you have a building debt bankruptcy situation, you lose your job, medical illness, medical costs, premature death of a spouse, divorce, caring for aging parents, retirement, and other medical and long-term care situations. So there's a lot of things that can happen to you that can definitely throw you off target, and having those strong skills will definitely get you through. So not only is what kind of an impact can it have on your plan, but if you manage it right, how does it get you through? And maybe it's not as good as you wanted it to be, but at least you can make it through with the least amount of impact as possible. So managing those critical events is real important. So here's where I wanted to spend some time and really get into some of the ways that we look at the budgeting and management. So I talked before about the financial independence gives us an idea of whether you have a surplus or a deficit each year. So what I want you to look at is this column here. So this is an example where the income flows on the left, then you have expenses, and don't worry about the numbers, there's all different types of numbers, but you have income, you have expenses, but what is your net? This is annual income, positive or negative. This is the same thing as your checkbook, right? If you have $3,000 and you know you're going to spend $1,000 a month, well, if you're at $1,200 a month, you're going to fall short for those 3 months or whatever your plan is. So here you're looking at a negative cash flow and you want it to be a positive. But here's the big key. At some point it's going to turn negative because you're starting to use up your investments. But what we look at is down here under the bottom one, if it says that this person should have a positive $10,000 cash flow for that year, right here, and we get together next year and it was only a $1,000 positive cash flow, there's something wrong in their budget. They're spending more. So let's use a very simple, you have a bank account that has $10,000 in it. You're living, you're doing whatever you're doing. You're putting money into your retirement plan, account. All those things are happening. But you said, I make this much money, and I spend this much money, and I put this much money aside. Then we come back, and that bank account only went up to 11,000, not 20,000. we have to find out why that happened. It's not a bad thing. It's just, why did it happen? And it's interesting. Sometimes somebody goes, oh, that's right, I forgot. I'm spending this much on this hobby, or whatever it might be. A lot of times it's, oh, well, we gave this big gift to my granddaughter because she had a wedding. Well, we didn't plan for it, but at least that explains where all that money went. Then the problem is, how do you project this out for 30, 60 years, whatever it is, and project all those scenarios that can happen? Because I promise you, if you're 60 and you have this come up that you didn't plan, it's going to come up when you're 70 or 80 or whatever it might be. So budgeting is not just how do you get control of the basic math right today, but it's also how do you predict these things that are going to happen to you, right? If what teenagers, 20, what they do is, I have enough money in my bank account today, I am good. But they're not planning for all of these unknowns, the car breaking down and all these things. So guess what? They're almost always at a negative cash flow because you don't think of the things you don't think of. So we always want to force that when you try to get control of a budget, because you can have good intentions, but the reality falls flat because you don't think of those things. We have this assessment where you can walk through, and you can basically, it's a yes and no, and find out where you're having kind of more immediate needs. Simple things like, do you know what your FICO score is? Everybody here know what their FICO score is? Yeah, and find out. I mean, that's, if you have a good FICO score, what does that mean? You get good credit, but what does that mean? You can spend more, but what does that mean? Lower interest rate, what does that mean? What? Increasing credit? Well, but what does that mean? I want you to get to the point of the topic of the day. You could spend more. You're going to increase debt, but let's say you're going to do that anyway. By having a good FICO score, what does it ultimately mean? What'd you say? Not there yet. What's that? They're loaning you money, but if you have a good FICO score and I have a horrible FICO score, you're paying it back. What's that? Save money how? That's it. That's all I was trying to get us to. It is money. A good FICO score is cash. Please drive. Did we make an impact on that? What does a good FICO score mean? It is the same as money, because if you go to a credit card and they charge you 20%, but because you have good credit and you get a loan and they make you pay 3%, that's a lot of money. If you go buy a house, some of them may give you a 6%, or somebody may give you a 4%, or you refinance, whatever it is. Just understand, FICO score is not nothing. It's not so you can get loans. It's so that you can get good, financially sound loans when you need it for whatever you need it for. And it really has a big effect on the budget, because just like the United States government, a lot of our income is used to pay what? Our loans. Does everybody remember a couple years ago when there was a threat of our AAA rating for our government bonds? Right? And if that went down, what does that mean? It hurt our budget. Our budget would be slammed because we have to pay a higher interest rate on the same money. So, this here is a budget. There's lots of different forms you can use, but start writing these down. And I'm going to get to the big, clear thing that we want to look at. So the first thing is, what is your income sources? What is your cash on hand? Now, for this purpose, I don't care what is in your 401k. I want to know what your cash on hand is. And there's a reason why for this. And then what are your expenses? And I don't care that you spent this much money on a latte. right? What I care about is, what is your mortgage? What is your car payment? What is your health insurance payment? Right? These things that we cannot survive if they don't get paid each month. You will survive if you don't buy that latte. Yeah.
What's the best way when you're calculating your monthly income? Like, so I serve part-time too, so it's kind of like a variable income.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the best way to account for that? Like some days, the lowest I could set the month would be like $100, but some days the month would be $300.
It's interesting you say that, because if you are commission-based, which is a similar thing, you sell cars, you whatever it is, banks will be very skittish giving you a loan if you have inconsistent income. But what will they be happy to see? Great credit. If you have inconsistent income but you have a great credit, that will override the inconsistent income. But for budgeting, you have to take estimates. That's all you can do. You have to basically and error low, right? Error low. Those dollars that you made one week that were better than the week before, I always say that's not your money. It's to pay for the week that you didn't do well, right? So it is always a rainy day fund when you're in that kind of a situation. Now, if you get at the end of the year and you were expecting that you were going to make $12,000, but you ended up making $15,000, what's that equivalent to? What? It's a positive cash flow profit, but what is it equivalent to people that have consistent income? Bonus. But you don't look at it. Okay, we need to have an extra talk with you. No, I'm just joking. But the bonus is because the company did well. But if you properly plan your monthly budget based on average or below average performance with serving or whatever it might be, if you do well at the end of the year, that's a bonus. That's take a trip, put more money aside, whatever it is, but that's that extra stuff. And guess what? If you didn't do that well, you didn't lose your apartment or whatever it is, right? So that's the way I would manage that. So the expenses, it's very critical to do this program. I don't care how you spend your money going to the movies, going out to dinner. I don't care about any of that stuff, because that is important on what we just talked about. If you have a chunk of money and it's gone, guess what? You don't get coffee. You don't get so it will manage itself. But what you have to start with are those things that you really want and need to pay for to survive. Let me ask you a question. Going to the grocery store and spending $200 on groceries, is that a need or is that, whatever? It's a need, right? So that would be an expense that I would want to know about, right? What's that?
I said it depends too. Like for me, that would be too much because as soon as I'm like, what if you have a family?
Whatever the number is, what I'm trying to differentiate is the difference between the need to have food to survive and the need to order pizza and go to the Chinese store and whatever it is every night, because guess what? That expense is a luxury. It's not a need. So sometimes people split those to, I have enough budget to cover my groceries, whatever the number is. But if I have enough money in my budget and I do well, then I can go out to eat every once in a while. I can splurge and do some of these things. We call that the ramen noodle rule. No, I'm just joking. So this is the focus of what we're trying to get at. And if you leave here with some ideas, that's great. If you want to just copy this, I don't really care. It is for you guys to use. But here's the key. Has anybody heard that saying, like, when you're at the casino and if you win a little bit, the first thing you do is put it in your pocket and never bring it out? Has anybody heard that before? Well, it's a good rule. If you go to the casino, which I'm not a good gambler, so I don't put a whole lot back in my pocket. But anyway, you have to move money sometimes to know that it's real, to know that you're on top of it. So what we do with people that really want to get control of their budget is you actually go to your bank and you create 3 separate bank accounts. 3. Not 1, 3. The reason why I was talking before about the cash on hand, the second one, is because if you don't have any cash on hand, then you can't do the 3-bucket approach, because you have to have cash to fund your needs for that month. So if you don't have cash, there's a 2-bucket approach that gets you there, but you ultimately, I've been doing this personally for me 20 years. So what you basically do is whatever your income is, this is, I'm going to use, ma'am, I'm going to use you as an example, miss, your example of an inconsistent income, because I think it even is more relevant here. You have all of your income go to that bucket. I just have a money market account. A little higher interest, but who cares? I don't care about interest rate in this scenario. I care about control. So all of my income goes into this one bucket, and let's just, I don't know, let's say that it's $2,000 a month. So you have your job, you have maybe somebody's giving you money, you got a rental income, you got investment, whatever it is coming into this bucket, and that equals, let's go higher, let's say $4,000. For you, when you start looking at your budget, you find out that you're spending $4,300 a month, right? So the first thing you need to do is say, I have to get my expenses broken down to $4,000, period. One of the buckets, and this here is your bank account, and it is a very clear account for checking. This is, how many people use bill pay and ACH and those types of things? That's what you do in this account. Your mortgage comes out of that account. Your groceries, not eating out at the restaurants, that comes out of this account. You write a check or use your debit, whatever it is. ACHs, bill pays, your cable bill, everything comes out of this account. So let's say that these numbers, when we go back to this structure, did I lose it? Right here, when I was talking about the expenses, I want you to break it up into what you need to do and what you would like to do, right? So this is what I need to spend every month. This is going out on a date, going to a movie, taking a trip. So let's say that your expenses all add up to $2,500. We bring in 4, $2,500 has to be spent, which leaves how much over here? Right? 15. But we said you were running at a deficit. So you aren't spending 15, you're spending 18 or whatever the number is. And people play games with themselves all the time because when they run short, what do? They create a 4th account called credit card. It's only $200. It's only a book. It's only a this. It's only a that. Next thing, this starts building up over time, and this all of a sudden turns into a debt over here that you have to pay to stay current. And if you have bad FICO scores, that payment's higher. Then it gets too high, and then you try to debt consolidate. Anybody here heard of like Sophie or some of those? What do they do? Just like I said, they help you consolidate to hopefully a lower rate, but that's a bill over here. So you took an expense for pleasure and you turned it into a long-term expense just to survive. Because if you don't pay that bill now, it turns into a bankruptcy, right? Or a slow pay or a credit hit or whatever it is. So in this situation, our first goal is to get this to at least be equal. $4,000, $2,500, $1,500. So in another account, you put in the $1,500. So all the money comes in here, and that's why it's nice to have enough money to start the month. So for this person to do it right, I would want you to have $4,000 so that while you're doing this down here, your new money is filling that bucket back up during the month you're doing it down here. But if you don't have any money, that money has to go down immediately and pay those bills, and it's hard for people to track sometimes. Okay? 4,000 comes in. At the beginning of the month, you send $2,500 over. Every time you pay a bill, write it on your spreadsheet. Write it down, make sure that it got paid, make sure that it got paid on time. My mortgage, I always pay that a month ahead. In case something gets messed up, I always just pay ahead. You pay those down. You got $1,500 left over. This is where you use your debit card and your checks primarily, right? You know, your friend has a birthday party, you want to buy it out of here. Debit cards, take cash out, whatever you want to do. It comes out. You never take money for your own personal use anywhere else. It has to come out of this account. Savings is a two-part approach. It is either an accounting or a separate holding. For me, I basically, it is an accounting. So for example, when this gets more advanced, you actually leave money behind. So let's say, let's walk this farther. Don't let me forget that, because we will get to that. But I apologize to you guys here. But as we go through, if we can't stay on budget, what do? We have to spend less over here, but what else can we do? We can sell that expensive car and get a cheaper car. It's sacrifices, right? But in other words, if you can't make it work here for some reason, then all of a sudden, that $450 car payment, maybe you trade it in and you get it down to $250, and you just now created it. And again, whether you like it or not, cash is cash. Budgets are budgets. It's a zero-sum game. So you go through, you can manage that, but the biggest thing is for this one, if it's $1,500, and again, the numbers is whatever it is for you. Don't use these literally. If you go through and you're 2 weeks in, I don't care how you spent the money. I just care if you're 2 weeks in and you're at $750, you're doing well, right? Don't micromanage it. Don't make it harder than it has to be. But if you're 2 weeks in and you've already spent $1,250 and you only have $250 left, you have a serious problem. Or you have to find out why that happened. So for example, sometimes people, if they're going to go on that really cool ski weekend, right, in the second half of the month, well then guess what? Pinch the pennies in the first 2 weeks, because you know you have those expenses coming up. But if you don't take it out of this budget, where's it going to come from? It's going to go on the credit card, and we got the same problem over again. And for people that are older, they take money out of their savings for retirement to make up for it. So a lot of people, they save in the 401k, but then they take a loan on it. It's defeating the whole purpose. Yeah, go ahead, ma'am.
I was going to say, so your first bucket is really just to funnel money through.
Let's get to your comment when you have surpluses, right? All of a sudden, you got a raise at work and you got your expenses down to $3,500. $6,500, whatever it is. The point is, you now have a surplus because you got control of your budget. Your income went up. Whatever happened, so all of a sudden you have a $1,000 difference. If you bring in $4,500, spending $35,000, you just leave an accounting on there that says, hey, at the beginning of this month, I'm leaving $1,000 in this account. So as all this money comes back in, if it is now, remember, you're bringing in $45,000, before you pay yourself the next month, how much are you going to have in that account? $55,000. Then the next month, how much are you going to have in that account? $65,000, and so on. So just do it as an accounting at that point. Then once you get that money built up enough, and the reason why I wouldn't do it too quickly is exactly what we talked about before. You don't know if you're going to have a bad month. Some of these things are going to happen. So you're building up an emergency fund by that accounting work. Make sense? Yeah.
So at the end of the month, if budget's for free, if I have a surplus, do I route it back to budget one or just hold?
That is probably, that lays out what your goals are ultimately. If you're building up money here, but you also built up money here, if you're really looking to buy that house in 3 years or something, then obviously grab that as an opportunity. I'm a big believer that I hate, some people say, well, do you know how much that latte you buy every year? If you put that money into a savings account, you whatever it is, when you're 100 years old, you'd have $4,000, some crazy number. Forget that. If you can't enjoy life, what are we doing? Right? You're supposed to enjoy things in life as long as you can afford it. So back to you say there, usually if you're meeting the goals of saving for the house, saving for retirement, building up an emergency fund, then as far as I say here, if you built that up and you're showing consistency, that is where you may go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to buy that nicer car. And you're shifting some of that over. Or I've always wanted to go on a shopping spree, or I've always wanted to go on that ski trip, or whatever it is. All of a sudden, you're building that up so that you can do some of the things you really want to do because you were aggressively controlling what you don't need to spend. All of a sudden, people, you know what? I don't need all those fancy new things because I'd rather give that money, or I'd rather go on that one big trip. So all of a sudden they change their priorities. And that is a great way. So when you have surplus here and here, that really comes out. Then each month you're adjusting this a little bit, right? Because maybe you're getting control and you're like, I don't need that much, right? But you have to have a positive cash flow for any of this stuff to work. Does that all make sense? Yeah.
Is there any reason why you couldn't, or I couldn't just have my paycheck go into my savings account for bucket number one, and then transfer to the, and then the surplus would,
Have it go into here?
yeah, is there a reason why bucket number one could not be a savings account? And then the surplus would in theory like be building interest. Because we can choose, I mean, I'm sure it's like,
You mean savings, checkings, or whatever?
yeah, because like
Yeah.
you can choose like whether, 50% goes to our savings, 50% goes to our checking, like if I just put 100% into the savings and then transferred 2 and 3.
I would have all your income go here. I don't care what kind of account it is, if that makes sense.
But it could be a savings.
Could be a savings. I have everything going to a money market. Could be a checking account. I don't care what kind of interest rate you're getting when you're trying to control, because the money you save just by controlling is way more money than you would ever get on interest on this. So I was going to say one thing about that. You brought up a good point. It'll come back to me. But what's that? Yeah, you want to be, like, I personally use Huntington, and Huntington, I have a lot of flexibility. You can get some of the free accounts, and you can do some of those things, and you want to, I mean, obviously, if it gets in a situation, if you're writing a lot of checks here, that's the one you want free, unlimited checks, but you really should only have to move money several times. So for me, I send one transfer here, one transfer here. Oh, I know what I was going to say, taxes. Because of awareness, whether you are pro-taxes or against taxes, I'm a big believer that everybody should have to write a check to pay their taxes. What would that do to you? How big of an impact? But why do they do that? To help you budget, they have everything come out every paycheck, just like saving for your retirement plan, just like everything else. But a lot of times people don't have a clue how much they're really sending over in certain areas because it's happening automatically. In one aspect, that's really good, but in the other aspect of awareness, it's not that good. So people that are self-employed, right, serving, I don't know, W-2 or anybody that is like a salesman, 1099, self-employed, they have to write out checks. If you're retired, you have to write out checks a lot for estimated quarterlies and things like that. And it's a different thing. So, but my point about that is, if you have to be very deliberate spending or sending these monies over, that's very important for self-awareness. So I'll send those twice. I'll break up the money. If this money's been grown. Now my checking, like when I pay taxes, I pay it out of this account. And I just literally sent over another payment. So I did an extra payment over here, and then I wrote a check immediately. So it was a very exact. Or if I have a vacation coming up, I know I need to build this up a little bit more. So emergency fund, you move things around. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's very clear. And if you do this for 1 year, you will know exactly what you spend your money on. You will know exactly what your budget is, and you will be on top of what you can and can't do to stay on target. Does that make sense? The only other thing I'll put here, this is the 2 bucket, and the only thing here is you have all of your money go into this account first because you need that money in there right away to start paying some of these bills, and then you send it over here, and then you start doing accounting to build this up until you have enough money to do that separate account. But a lot of times emergency funds and your initial savings come out of that first bucket up at the top, and all of a sudden you've seen this build up to $20,000 and you want to do something with it. You want to put it into a bank CD, or you want to put it to the Roth, or you want to put it into an investment vehicle, or maybe you got that built up and you're like, I'm feeling comfortable, I'm going to up the amount that I contribute to my 403B or 457 for retirement or a 529. All types of vehicles that you use for different goals. So that really helps you just get control of everything. A lot of times, some of the systems, they let you know what you spent money on. Well, you spent this much on groceries and this much on gas and this, but the problem is it's not helping you control the flow while it's flowing, if that makes sense. It's more of a responsive. Here's how much I did spend, as opposed to, I want to control my spending, so I want to put a governor on this. I want to put a control on this, and that's what this type of a system does. And this here is a form where you basically write down, here's my income account, and this is where the accounting comes up. How much did it grow? Where's the income coming from? So what's the beginning balance, ending balance? Then you have a fixed account. This is your number 2 bucket. You write in how much each of those bills were. It should only be 10. It's not complicated, right? You have a mortgage, you have an insurance payment. I mean, whatever it is, you might have 10 or 15 here. And then down here is just an accounting. So every month, just like any business in the world, they have accounting of what you started and what the flow and changes have been over time. You do that for a year, there's no question in my mind that you will have full clarity of what your budget is and how you're able to control it. Okay? This is about the credit reports. Good credit, bad credit, TransUnion, Equifax, Experian, you got free credit reports. I personally like LifeLock. That's one that I use. And one of the reasons is because just like controlling, if you look at a credit report, and you can find out what happened. But have you ever gotten a call from your credit card? They say, hey, did you do this? Did you make this charge in Argentina? No, that wasn't me. Well, we caught it, so we were able to stop it. Well, that's what this does. If somebody's trying to take out credit or anything on your behalf or something like that, you have to verify it. They let you know before. So if you refinance your house or something, then it will say, hey, somebody's checking your credit report now, as opposed to you finding out a year later. And financial, identity theft, all that type of fraud happens a lot. So I personally like that. It also gives you all the reports. I don't represent LifeLock, but I just think it's a good, there's other ones like that, but they help you at the beginning before something happens. And I always make sure that I bring this up because it's real important. If you don't have wills, healthcare powers, those types of things, please make sure you check on those. And also, if you have parents that are getting older, please make sure they have those. It'll make your life a lot easier. This is just a side note because we find too many people don't have beneficiaries properly recorded and their wills and proper documents in case they go to a facility or in case they pass away. So it's real important to have that. And that's it. So I'll be happy to stick around for some questions. Yeah. You can either just write it on your form, or I have these and you can request them. So if you want those forms,
I'm gonna. Sorry, I don't want to.
yep, go ahead.
Does anyone have any other questions? Thank you, Jay. For coming.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna be sending everyone an email here in about 5 minutes with Jason's contact information for any other questions. You get those sheets from there. So our next lunch and learn is January 18th. It'll be at the Ross again. It'll be on beating the winter blues. So we'll see you then. Thank you.
And again, my apologies for running up to, I'll stick around for any questions as long as you guys feel free. Turn this off. Yes.
Great.
Did that come? Is this off? I think the eye's not on the prize. The prize is controlling the cash flow.
Right.
And as soon as you have some money build up, then worry about where's the best place to put it.
Yeah, I think we're in a situation where it's like years of doing things on credit cards that we pay off every month. But like to earn the extra points and like gift cards back and stuff
Well,
like that. So we pay it off every month, but it's like it's harder to keep track of what else because it's like that casual stuff mixed in with real expenses, and then it just we're like, well, wait a minute, like, which thing is too much? Like,
Well,
and so it's hard. I like the idea of the way it's sorted out with the buckets. It seems like it would be clear.
if I personally do the same thing, you got to remember, credit card is just your wallet.
Right.
It's just a way of moving money from here to there.
Right.
I use my credit cards to get points as well. Then I pay those credit cards off with my variable account. Always. If you have something like, let's say that credit card has a cable bill on it, because you get points, let's say, I don't know if you can. I personally don't. I keep it paid, direct bill paid from my bank account. Those points for that is less important than keeping things controlled. Or you could have another card specific for that. Yeah.
Okay, that would make sense. Yeah,
You
because
know-
I think that I've got that kind of situation where it's like the groceries end up on the credit card and the gifts end up on the credit card. Everything.
Or
else.
you can be super analytical. Or you can be super analytical, and you can basically, like my credit cards, I actually pay it off multiple times a month, just because I don't like it keep getting bigger. So I'll probably pay that down, like the water heater. Okay, I put $2,000 on my frequent flyer credit card. I moved $2,000 down from my money market to my variable account, and then I did a payment to pay it off. So I didn't pay it out of my variable, I paid it out of my reserve fund. But I had to move money, and it's very clear and crystal. So let's say that credit.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
So, but
you
let's
can still pay it out of the account towards your credit card.
exactly. But
You
once
have to pay attention.
but once it turns into a maintenance, if you got to a point where you're paying $100 a month on this $10,000 credit, don't put it on your and you're stopping. You finally got it. Look, that's a debt I got to pay down. Put it on the fixed side, and then whenever you want to pay it down out of the variable. So when she asked, I got $500 extra built up. Take that $500 from the variable account, the right one, to pay off some of the balance of that $10,000 account that you're paying the fixed payments from the fixed account. When you were talking also, you could do accounting where, let's say you have $1,000 on that credit card that month, and let's say $750 was because you went out to dinner and whatever it is, or even it went out to dinner. Then you have $250 is $50 is a cable bill and $200 is groceries. Well, then just pay the credit card off $750 from this account, paid off $250 from this account. I don't want you to report the $750 over here, but you need to write down over here $200 paid through frequent flyer credit card, and leave a trail, and then your $50 for whatever I said that was, or groceries, and then $50 paid through the credit card. It doesn't matter; it's all the same as long as it's properly accounted.
Right. And then just stop shopping at Target because then things all get muddled and I spend too much.
Yeah,
because that's
those-
groceries,
those
and
are-
clothes, and
Those behavioral
That's a whole different problem.
challenges are everybody's problem because
Okay.
we live right
Yeah.
next to a Target too. But it is so if you're because for me I love just walking around like a Home Depot or something. I need that grill bit or something like that. But if I decide to buy one, I have to buy it from the variable account.
Yeah, I do like the idea of that because my husband and I, when we got married, it was easy. We were saving money left and right because we were like, hey, anything that was, he had money, I had money, and we had a money market. And if either of us had money left over in our accounts, then we just moved it to the money market, and that was our savings. And then that grew, and then we had kids, and then we had daycare, and it was expensive, and we kept drawing from the savings to help pay for all the expenses related to the kids and the daycare. And that money has dwindled, and we bought a house. And all of it's dwindled, and it's going, and I'm like, we're not
spending,
Yeah.
we're not saving anymore, and we're spending out of that, and we need to start saving for the kids for college because we're not doing that yet either. So I'm like, but we have separate credit card accounts and we have separate bank accounts, but we have the money market, and I'm like, we need to combine something here and watch it better.
Well, there's two things. One is you said that you're seeing that it's dwindling.
Yeah.
You're watching it close enough to at least see a trend, right? And then the other thing is sometimes, especially when you have shared accounts or things like that, one person thinks there's more money in it than there is, because even though the physical money's there, it's already spent.
Right.
Because we still need to pay that mortgage that's coming up on the 20th.
Right.
It just hasn't showed up yet. So that's why I like, you ever heard that term, pay yourself first, right? Save for retirement, pay yourself first. Same thing here. As soon as you get the money, pay those expenses first. They're paid because they're in the account. It doesn't matter when they physically get paid, but they're out of your cash flow. You can't control it anymore because it's in that account to be paid.
Yeah.
Now, everything else, if you run short, guess what? Hey, do you want to go out to dinner tonight?